And I think we'll kick off with James, if you don't mind just providing a bit of an update where we are on Manchester Originals at the moment.
Okay, will do. I think those of you who heard myself and Daniel do the last members update will remember that it was... Am I on? Right, sorry. Those of you who heard the update Daniel and I did probably 6 weeks or so ago would remember that it's before we'd received any offers, so we were a little bit what's going to happen, not quite sure. So the short version of where we are is we're very happy with where we are in terms of number of offers, in terms of who's made an offer to invest in Manchester Originals, and in terms of the scale of those offers. So I think the offers that we received, we were into double figures. In terms of who's shown interest in investing in our team is very much in line with the I suppose the objectives that we set. You're all familiar with those, where we talked about we wanted a sporting partner, so we wanted to partner with somebody who's already invested in sport and running elite sports teams. And we've got that level of interest. We've got that both within cricket and in US sport. Some quite different investors, I suppose, who showed interest in us. So what we did at that point was we cut the list down. So we discussed it with quite a few of us pretty much everybody who sat here and other advisors, and we whittled that down to 6 people who we thought were the most likely to be the right kind of people, and also that reflected the quantum of the offers that we received. There was a broad spread, shall I say. I think there's probably a couple of bottom fishers who we didn't talk about for very long, but there was some really, really significant numbers that have been tabled in the very first round, which I think we were all, by the time it got to the date when the offers were going to come in, we're all getting a little bit nervous about things, but it came through at the kind of level that is towards our aspirations and towards something that we think will be good. So the summary is we're in a good place. I think there's probably still quite a long way to go. The others on the panel will talk about that, but it's a really promising start with some great people involved, and really promising. So we're happy so far.
Brilliant, thanks, James. This is a hugely intricate and complicated process, and I'm going to hand over to Vic, who will give us an update on kind of where we're at. We're sort of in a phase 2 at the moment, are we?
Yes, we are. Evening all, great to be here. The process that has been designed for 2 things. It is first and foremost to get into the 100 8 of the very best sports investors, owners from sports, entertainment, technology, people that can build on what is here and in the other 7 venues to create something special. But it's also been designed to maximise the investment that can come into the game to help the whole game grow and build from here. So that is the process. It does have some complexity because the kind of 8 teams at once, frankly, doesn't happen very often. So what we did, I'll go back a step and then explain where we are now and what's happening next. Through the summer, when the 100 was going on in 24, we were meeting with lots of people. We reached out to about 200 people, showed interest, and we spoke to, when I say people, companies, individuals. About 100 of those signed NDAs and formally entered our process in September, start of September. We gave them, from the start of September, about a month, mid-October, to compile, look at our information, read through it, speak to management teams here and elsewhere, and put offers on the table. At that stage, they could put in for all 8 if they wanted to, and there were some people that said, look, I just want to be part of this tournament. I love the tournament. I love English cricket. I want to help. I want to be part of it. I'll take anyone. There were some that went for 2 or 3, and there were some that went, right, that is the team I want, and it's that or nothing. That was mid-October. We then took a bit of time, and as James talked about, we did this kind of 8 times over where we discussed what the bids were, brought to a short list, 5, 6, 7 per team. We then have gone into round 2, as we're calling it, where every one of them has come here, has met with the team. If they haven't done already, had a really good look round Emirates Old Trafford, met the management team, understood from these guys what their vision is for the team, what they want to do with Manchester Originals, with Lancashire, with Old Trafford, and so on and so forth. They've done the reciprocal, so this team have heard their vision and what they want to do and how they see themselves supporting what we've just talked about. That's ongoing, and that will continue into early December. What will then happen in mid-December is they can put in a further, the next round of bids. And again, what that has allowed them to do is not move past just pure financials, but actually meet the team here and go, actually, these are the people I can work with. These are the people I really want to connect with. I resonate with Lancashire and Manchester, and that's what I want to do. We'll then work with the team here to whittle down however many bids they get at that point to a top 2. So these will think, actually, those are the 2 people I can really work with. I like both the financial and the strategic and all those sort of things. They work with us. It resonates with what we want to do. We'll then screech into Christmas. So we'll take a little pause. We'll have some turkey, eat too much food, come back in the new year. And then in mid-January, we'll work with those 2 for effectively best and final offers, working on both importance governance items and obviously the financial aspect. And so the idea being that by February time, we'll go into what is called period of exclusivity, which is effectively these have a preferred choice, and the lawyers will do their bit and work for a few months to get the contract signed ahead of the summer. That's the process.
Fantastic. I'll just follow up. And so that means that the 2025 competition probably won't look a great deal different to, it may be a sort of transition year, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll work through that period. Once they sign, by the time they sign, say in April, by that time player drafts are done, all the planning's been done, tickets are on sale. It's going to be very different for it to look and feel for the average fan, very different. There'll be a lot of work going on in the background to hand that over in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Vic. Richard, I'm going to come to you. This is a significant, hugely significant point for the English game, and some will see it as selling off the family silver, and that there's a threat, a sort of existential threat to the traditional game. Can you give some reassurances on that? We've seen some issues in rugby, I think, with clubs going into administration after purchases. Can you give some reassurance on kind of your safeguards?
Yeah, I hope so. Evening, everyone. We have been looking at what happened in rugby 10 or 15 years ago when an amount of investment came in, and I think we've lost 3 clubs since COVID. Now, we haven't lost a county club ever. There are some near misses at times. Not necessarily because there's not enough money going into the club, but perhaps sometimes clubs have a tendency to spend a bit too much. Normally on the pitch, frankly, when ambitions get a little bit too far ahead of themselves. But we don't ever want to lose one of our clubs. And our 18 county clubs are the hearts of our community. That's partly why when we're looking to bring investment in, we're looking to bring investment into separate entities rather than the county clubs themselves, because we know we can't afford to lose a club in Lancashire or Yorkshire or Surrey, because they do much more than just put a team on the pitch. They represent the community and everything that goes on with the Lancashire Foundation. It really represents a region, so we won't go down that line. We need to protect those. We think the investment opportunity here will protect county cricket, I think, for a minimum of 20 to 25 years. When I look at the kind of value that we can bring in and where that value is going. So sometimes when people sell something, it ends up going to a shareholder who then buys a yacht in the Bahamas, and that's it. Any money that's coming into cricket through this is going into the county clubs. And it's going into things such as reducing debt, into the player pathway, into reserves position to make sure everybody's got a bit of a reserve, into investments. This club has seen an amazing renaissance over the last 10 to 12 years with all the developments that have been going on. And those developments have given the club a long-term advantage over the next 20 to 30 years because there's income coming in away from cricket. That's not the case in the majority of clubs. So when the money comes in, if the money comes in, because we've still got some way to go, we're going to make sure it gets really well spent. And I genuinely believe that it will help county cricket clubs to survive and thrive. Remember also that the membership. I love the membership element of cricket clubs. I think it's unique. But one thing that the membership element is not made for is to bring capital investment into the game. There's lots of enthusiasm and there's loads of passion and love, but it's not as if there's somebody there able to put a shed load of money in that can then be used to drive the asset, and that's something that we want to protect. This opportunity with the 100 will allow us to have the best of both worlds in terms of maintaining clubs and however they want to be maintained, plus having investment to genuinely keep the clubs thriving and moving forward for the next 20 to 25 years.
Thank you, Richard. We'll come to Tim. Tim, you are the lead on the sports business group for this process at Deloitte. It'd be helpful, I think, if you just explain kind of what the role Deloitte is having in the process. And then we've seen some concerns being raised by, I'm going to use the name Nalit Modi, and Richard's going to shudder. But talking down the values, and obviously Deloitte have been involved in placing values on the teams and the process. And what reassurances you can give that the £350 million that I think Richard Thompson has mentioned publicly about being a sort of baseline, possibly, a broad figure about kind of how you've placed those values on and how confident you are that we'll get there.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So my name is Tim Ridge and I lead Deloitte's Specialist Sports Business Group. A big factor of the team that I lead is the world of M&A in sport. We're responsible for some of the largest transactions that take place both here in Manchester and around the world of sport. And I want to echo something before we get into it that Richard just said. This is the most principle-based process that I've personally ever been involved in. The ECB have brought both ourselves and Rain in a dual role to both market the asset to the market, to the investment market, but also to ensure that the process is robust, that the considerations of all of the stakeholders are taken into mind. And I go back to the very first meeting that I had with Richard, probably best part of 2 years ago now, where we started to talk about this, and it was very, very clear that this wasn't just about the money. Of course, the money is incredibly important, and as Richard says, has the opportunity to safeguard the game for the future, but it was about finding the right partner. And I think that is what underpins the valuations as well here, because what we have with the 100, and part of my role has been in trying to both convince and demonstrate that in the world of sport, what the 100 provides is a very special opportunity. I go round the world talking to both investors and sports rights owners, and they ask me continually, how's the 100 done it? There is the diversity of audience, and there is the equity between the men and the women's game that is genuinely held up, very genuinely, I'm not just saying this, it's held up as an exemplar in the world of sport. And the sport of cricket, and every member of County Cricket Club should be incredibly proud of that position, because what investors are looking for at the moment is the opportunity to engage with a sport that is global, firstly, to engage with the traditions, so everything that a County Cricket Club provides, and then critically to engage with a new audience, and that is what the 100 provides and is a differentiator to any other sporting property in this country. Cricket's ahead in that regard in terms of who it appeals to. So that's really what has underpinned the valuation, and as others have said, the level of interest really does make us, have initial confidence that we're going to reach a very successful outcome. However, if we make decisions that actually leave some value on the table, that will be for the good of the sport, and that's an important principle as well.
Thanks, Tim. Andy, if you can grab that microphone. We'll just flick the button.
It's on.
Is it on? There we go. Andy, you've got a long and prestigious career in sports business. Could you just explain how you see this, what is going to be a significant amount of money investment coming into Lancashire cricket, and how that is going to be beneficial to the club as a whole and to the infrastructure here?
Yeah, I think it's important that the process leading up to this sale process, there was an awful lot of discussion between all of the counties. It wasn't just the 8 who happened to be the host venues for the 100, to make sure that the interests of all 18 counties were being properly looked after for the future. And it was at times a heated and difficult negotiation, but we all got to a place, I think at the end of the day, where we'd gone as far as we could, and we got to a place where all of the counties felt that this was for the good of the game. Now, I've said this a lot in front of our members, I'll say it again, I know there's a lot of people here who don't like the 100 at all, they don't like the concept of the 100, they don't like how it was implemented. I'm aware of that. I would also say the decision was taken before I came on board, so I can't take any responsibility for it. But I do think that it has created some incredibly positive things. And the first one for me was coming down. I refused to go to the 100 at first, but I did come down to a couple of games last season. And I saw families being entertained, mums with kids sitting around the pitch and sitting around the ground in a way that I've not seen since I was at school, you know, in the 70s when I used to come and watch Clive Lloyd et al. Play here. So I think that something positive was created. I think we're lucky that it's happening at Emirates Old Trafford and that we're a host venue. And I'm also, I think, proud of the fact that all 18 counties came to a position together where we can actually live with the solution. So let's get to that point. We then have to make sure that whatever happens now, for me, I'm chair of Lancashire, not of the Manchester Originals, that is in the best interest of Lancashire cricket. So what does that mean as we sit here today? It means a few things. We don't need to bring this money into the county right now, but it will be helpful. We've spent a lot of money developing the stadium over the last 12 years. It's in a great shape, but and the next 3-4 years are going to be tight financially. We're going to be making a profit, making a healthy profit, but the interest payments will be significant, and we've got to make sure we're in the best shape we can be. What the 100 lets us do is to reduce that amount of debt we've got to a sustainable position for the rest of this generation's time. That's what we've got to achieve now over the next few months for us, and I guess all other counties have got to do the same. We've also got to look after those counties where they are not so fortunate. There's at least 3 who we all know about who've been in pretty dire straits for the last few years, and I think this gives them a chance to get on a sure footing for the next 20 years, as Richard says. That's what we're trying to achieve. There will be big decisions as well. You know, the ECB are running a process to sell 49% of the Manchester Originals and the other franchises, or however we want to describe the teams. There will be pressure from some of the investors to increase that beyond 49%, and that's a massive decision. If you think about that, we're going to have a partner. That's the process. If we've got a partner and we want to sell more of the Manchester Originals at some point in the future to generate money, it's a more difficult process. It's a more difficult decision. That's the decision we have to take, but we will take that only if it really does mean that Lancashire for the whole future is on the steadiest footing possible. And what that means is we've got money to create a new cricket academy, because the one weakness still on this venue is we've not got a world-leading cricket academy, and we need to develop that. So we're looking at things in that light, get the debt down to a level where we can comfortably pay the interest rates, whatever happens in the future, interest payments, and we will look at that. So I think we can use this money for the benefit of Lancashire in the long run. But if we've got the 100 sorted out, we've got these new owners, we're attracting the best players from around the world, because I also passionately believe the product's not good enough at the moment, and it needs better players coming here from around the world. We still have this massive responsibility to sort out the blast. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, and I think let's get beyond this process and then really collectively get our heads around what we can do to make the blast more attractive and better, whilst protecting the other formats of the game that we need to, because my responsibility is to Lancashire and making sure Lancashire are competing in the best competitions. I don't believe we are today, and I believe there's more we can do. So let's use this to sort out other issues in the game as well.
Thanks, Andy. Vic, I'll come to you next. You are leading this process on behalf of the game as a whole, and you've obviously been around lots of different counties, including the non-host counties. And I think it's fair to say nothing's risk-free, is it? And there will be some concerns from both host counties and non-host counties about maybe some unintended consequences or the implications of this, which is a pretty radical change for English cricket. If you could just sort of summarise kind of what some of those concerns might be and how you've addressed them and kind of how you'll look at them going forward.
Yeah, it's a great question. There have been many meetings. It's not as if this has come about just off a whim or kind of overnight. There was a whole year worth of meetings throughout, whether it's in group settings or whether it was travelling to the different venues, host and non-host themselves. All of those thoughts, ideas, and have been kind of brought into this process and considered in the way that we look to go forward with it. And ultimately, the summary is we all kind of want the same thing. There's a lot. I mean, cricket has given me personally a huge amount. From I'm a member of 2 clubs. I played for one of the so-called non-host counties. It's given a huge amount for my career. And I'm in all the members that I've met, I think there's a huge amount of resonance that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, we want the sport to be in a better place than it is today and to have grown from where it is today. I've got 3 young kids that are just starting on their kind of their under-7s program at the local club and all those sorts of things. And if they can get a fraction of what this sport has given to me and the joy that it's given to me watching, I grew up in Birmingham, so I used to live quite close to the ground there and wander in and watch county champs there. Warwickshire were a strong side in the mid-90s. So if they can get anything close to that level of joy, that's kind of all this stuff what we're looking to do. And so this process, the concerns and the questions have all been, I feel, born out of that actually, through this process, can we ensure that the game will be in a stronger place? And look, obviously we can't predict the future accurately, but what we have been able to do is to learn, as has been asked previously, learn from other sports. We looked around. One of the advantages is that we're one of the latter sports to move, in this country anyway, into this space. So what has worked well? Which sports have done this positively to help grow the sport? And actually, which sports, perhaps, like the earlier example, can we learn from and make sure that those things don't happen to us? Are we doing things to make sure that the skills that are bringing in can help the 100, but then also help the rest of English cricket and the rest? Because obviously any ideas and skills, say on digital to engage with the next generation, won't just be fixed to that 4-game, 1-month period. It will bleed into the rest of cricket, which can only be beneficial. More kids loving the sport will only be beneficial for the things like the Blast. And then, as have been talked about, there are things. This isn't all of English cricket. There is so much other stuff that we then now need to take, deliver on, and then move forward onto. And things like the Blast has been mentioned, and how we grow that, and how we make sure that there is growth and headroom for all forms of cricket is something that we will look to do as a game together in a similar process through this winter and into next year as well. So. Yeah, look, there's a lot of things that each of us can think we can. Let's nudge at that. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. But making sure that this is done in the right way, with the right principles and values to ensure that cricket is in a healthier space, I think is what we all want from this.
Fantastic, thank you, Vic. James, I'll come to you now. I know that Lancashire have been really very good at regular communication with members. I'm sure you've had loads of communication, maybe sick of emails from Daniel and Andy. But one of the things that's been said, I think, James, by you, is that the board would prefer to hold on to the 51%. But there are different models of control, aren't there, whether 51% means overall control. But is there a scenario where you can see selling on some of that 51% and what that might mean? And is there a way for sort of members to control over matters that are important to you? I mean, maybe such as infrastructure or players or academy or those sorts of things.
Yeah, okay. So I think just to recap on what we've said so far around this 51-49 scenario, is, and Andy really talked about it a few minutes ago, where we don't have to sell any of that 51%. We don't need the money now. So there are two thoughts we've got. Well, we don't need the money. We will get some money from ECB selling the 49%. That's gratefully received, and we've got uses for that. But we don't have to sell any of the 51. The other thing for us is we firmly believe that this tournament is going to grow, and that the value of that 51% or the shares that we hold will grow over time. And we think that being a significant shareholder in Manchester Originals, is a good thing to do for the long term. So that, if that's your starting point, you're okay. Well, why would we sell some of that 51%? And I think what I've said previously, I think Andy and Daniel have both said when they've been asked, is look, we're open to look at doing that. Realistically, the only reason we would do that is if the kind of value that we're talking about to sell down our stake is so significant that we can sell X% of that 51, receive very significant value into the club. Don't forget, we get to keep 80% of that. 20% of it is shared amongst the game. If that 80% is a big enough number that it transforms things for us from an economic perspective, so to take what Andy was talking about, we can pay down a big chunk of our bank debt. What that does is that vastly reduces our use every year of surplus funds that we generate that we pay in interest to the bank or we need for repayments. We can use that money to redeploy that into our cricket. Andy talked about the pathway, the academy, the indoor cricket centre needs investment in it. It's not world class at the moment. It should be world class. So that's our thought process. And if the value that is there, attributed to the whole of Manchester Originals, is compelling enough, we have got a big decision to make. And as Andy said, that decision is simply what is in the best interest of Lancashire Cricket Club. Do we hold or do we sell some of that stake? Now, you talk about control type things and what can you control and what can't you control. That's a really complicated topic. Cards on table though. If somebody writes a huge cheque, and let's be clear, we are talking about very large amounts of money, and they end up owning 65 or 70% of a club for doing that, ultimately, when push comes to shove, they will be able to call the shots. If you can't agree what you're going to do and you've exhausted your abilities to have sensible conversations and all that kind of thing, somebody has got to say, hang on a minute, let's just be clear, this is the direction of travel. I know you don't support this on this point, but that's where we're going. So I think that it is important to be very clear with that. But when you kind of row back from that, as that's the end point here, when you get back into normal world, you're working as a partnership. We've got ideas that we've shared with investors around how we see that partnership working. They've shared those ideas with us. We're having some very productive conversations about that, and the investors in this round 2 will come back to us with their formal thoughts on how that partnership will look. So it's pretty complicated, but that's where we're headed really, and the kind of decisions we've got to take.
Thanks, James. And we're going to come to Daniel, who's been unusually quiet thus far. And obviously, you are CEO of Lancashire, not Manchester Originals, and it's the expansion of Manchester Originals and this process and the money that comes with it. Does that, to you, present a danger to Lancashire and Lancashire's core business and Lancashire's men's and women's teams and the business of Lancashire rather than Manchester Originals, and kind of how are you working through that?
Yes, thanks, Lizzie. So it's a really good question. I am the Chief Executive of Lancashire. That is my 100% focus. I've told people who've asked before, I think I'm currently the only venue CEO that isn't actually a board director of the host team of the 100, and that's because when the ECB have owned 100% of the shares, I felt that I had a conflict of interest as soon as I walked into a room trying to be on the board of Manchester Originals. So I have not been a director of Manchester Originals because the ECB owned 100% of the shares. I think once Lancashire get an amount of shares gifted to it from the ECB, thank you very much, by the way, very generous, is we will effectively we'll need a shareholder representative. So that's a different point at that point. So at that point, you are representing Lancashire's interests on that company. And absolutely, I've thought about this, and I come back. There's some people in this room who hate the 100, and I've always said from the start, this process is not a referendum on the 100. It's not a decision on whether we're going to have it or not have it. The 100 is here. It's contracted. There's nothing anybody in this room, me or anybody, can do about that. It's contracted. It has had a lot of benefits. I'm a traditionalist. My favourite, people might not believe that, but my favourite form of cricket is Test match cricket. Without county championship, you can't have Test match cricket. Okay, but I'm also aware enough to know that the future of the game relies on people who are a lot younger than me coming to watch cricket, and we need to find a way of keeping the game relevant amongst massive competition, not just from sport, but from entertainment. You can go to the cinema now. You can go down the pub and have a good night out with a live band. At the end of the day, we're competing against. We're competing against Albert Schloss, for example, in the centre of Manchester. This is one of the things that we're facing as a game as we go into it. I don't see the 100 as a clear and present danger to Lancashire Cricket Club. I see it as part of embedding Lancashire's future for the next 160 years of its existence. I want to use the 100 and use Manchester Originals to backfill and support Lancashire and provide funds to Lancashire that will enable it to continue to invest in its pathway and its academy and the future. That to me is really, really important. If you ask me what is a clear and present danger to the game, it's the global franchise market that the world seems to be sleepwalking into. One member said to me recently, well, if you didn't have the 100, then Livingston, Butler and Salt would all be playing in the county championship in August. I have to tell you, they wouldn't be. They'd be playing in America or they'd be playing in the Caribbean. So the thing we all need as a game to be pointing our guns at is the global franchise situation. There's currently, I think, 13 different tournaments over 12 months. I know that's not the topic for tonight, but you ask me what is the threat. That is the threat. And actually, knowing that, having a partner with somebody in the 100 who's got power and money that can support Lancashire's aims in terms of cricket around the world, that's actually, to me, I want somebody by our side that can support Lancashire's growth ambitions, that can basically say, that can help us fight off the threats of the global franchise market, because I genuinely don't believe that traditional county clubs on their own can fight off the global franchise market, and players deciding, well, it's a lot easier just to play white ball tournaments and not play any red ball at all. That's a complete nightmare. That's the threat, not the 100.
Thank you, Daniel. Bit of good news on that front, though. A certain Jimmy Anderson, who you may have heard of, didn't get picked up in the IPL auction, so completely free to come and play T20 Blast with the red rose on his shirt, or County Championship, or indeed whatever else you might fancy for him. Now, my role here tonight is as a pound shop Fiona Bruce, managing a question time. Now, before this event, Lancashire put out to you to put in your questions, make them as hard-hitting as possible, and as you'll understand, quite a lot of them were all along the same themes. I can understand all of your concerns and your questions. So what we've tried to do is sort of theme them and get a sort of representative to ask what I think will be questions on behalf of quite a lot of you put in. So we're going to start off with Joe Dibben, I think. Now, just wait, bit of logistics, just wait for a microphone. And then you've got your question, and if you can just, thank you very much.
Got two questions.
Oh gosh, greedy. Go on then.
I'll start with one. What level of interest from external investors is there in Manchester Originals and Lancashire Cricket as a cricket partner compared to other venues?
Yeah, we'll put that to you, Tim. Yeah.
Thank you. So I think, look, across the process, the level of interest is pretty unprecedented in terms of the number of parties that have considered an investment into the 100. So Vic talked about numbers of close to 200 different parties taking an initial look. When it comes to across the 8, I think we've got a pretty fair spread, to be totally honest. But it's safe to say that this is going to be one of the most competitive parts of this process, with very genuine interest from, as James said, a real mix of investors from different geographies and taking a kind of different approach as well, each having a kind of different thesis as to why they would want to invest here, and I think that's what makes it really intriguing.
Just to follow up on that, Tim, so we're not just talking about the biggest check here, are we?
Absolutely not, no. I mean, that has literally been the principle from the start. We in other processes, you talk about maximising value. Here, we're talking about optimising value, and that's a subtle change, but it's really, really important. And the role of that James and Daniel have had, and Andy, in almost vetting the investors to date, is extremely thorough, and I think that gives us optimism that we are going to truly optimise the outcome.
Fabulous, thanks. You had a second question, didn't you, Joe? But you've had the microphone nabbed away from you. Take it back to her. Take it back to her.
Thank you. What guarantees are being made to investors about the availability of England players for the 100, and what does this mean for the future of Test cricket in August?
That's probably Richard or Vic. Vic, is that you, Richard?
I'll do that one to start with.
You start,
And then,
go for it. Yeah.
We've got the 100 is played in a window where we tend not to play international cricket. I say tend not. It depends if we've got an Indian and an Australian summer or not. So in a 5-test summer, there is a window. In those summers where we've got 2 3-test series, there is a little bit of overlap. We are not giving any further assurances other than what we play at the moment and what we've got at the moment. So there are no other further assurances. One thing that is really interesting on the player stuff. Firstly, the quality of the pipeline that's coming through the county system is better than any other system in the world, and that's of huge appeal to investors, because having the best overseas is really important, but let's not underestimate the quality of our own players. There were 75 players, English qualified players, that played in the franchises around the world last year. The next best number was from Pakistan, where they had 45. So you can see that's of huge interest. Also picking up on something that was spoken about earlier, making sure that players are available to play in our competitions and in our summers. We have been very generous in the past in allowing players to go and play in competitions and issuing non-objection certificates to allow them to play in competitions around the world, even in our own summers. But we know that needs tightening up now, and we know that we need to protect our game, and sometimes we need to protect the players as well to make sure they're not suffering from burnout. And so there's a board meeting on Wednesday, and we're taking consultation from all of the counties to try and make sure that we can help the players to make good decisions, not just for themselves, but also for their clubs.
Vic, have you got something to add?
No, Richard
Okay,
summarised it
good.
well.
Excellent, excellent. Next question is from Jack Rule, who... there we go.
What measures will the ECB and the club put in place to ensure the continuation and integrity of the women's competition and prevent new owners from diverting funds from the women's teams to the men's teams?
That's for you, Vic.
So I start with that. It's a great question, and something that has been hugely important from the very start. So, I mean, the summary is we will absolutely protect what has been one of our, things that have stood the 100 out from all the other franchise leagues. There's two sides to that, actually. What was really interesting is when we were designing this process, we've put in place a lot of protections around funding and focus to ensure that that must go to the women's game, that must go to the men's game, and so on and so forth. We put in protections that if an investor were to come in, it remains one club, two teams, and the balance and all the rest of it, for exactly that fear. But what's been fascinating is as we've spoken to people around the world that know sports and the growth, the questions have come the other way around, actually. And the questions have come actually to us of, are you keeping these two together? And we've said, well, yes. And I've kind of gone, right, here we go. Let me explain what. They go, no, because if you separate them out, I'm out as an investor, I'm done. The growth of the women's game and what that brings to the 100 and to English cricket is absolutely seen as something that's brilliant. So there is the side of it to your question, which I know wasn't the precise question, but actually the investors are on our side with this. But there are, both in the legal documents and the governance and all the rest of it, there are all the protections put in place to make sure that if that were to change or if anyone were to come in, they are not able to do that.
I just follow up on that because it's a great point, Jack, that I think is critical in the whole thing. One of the things, when Tim and colleagues took the teams to market, there was part of the information that was shared was a team specific. It was a relatively short information deck, but a team specific information deck. And one of the things we did is really majored on the one club, two teams approach that Manchester Originals has had from day one. Those of us who set it up were utterly passionate about. It gave us an opportunity, yes, to start a sports team in Manchester from scratch, but a gender equal sports club in a way that may never have happened before. So we kind of over-indexed on that a bit in what we said to the investors, just to test their mettle really and see how they responded to it. But to back up what Vic said, they want to talk about that hugely. You know, it is clear that I think this is the special X factor that the 100's got actually, and I think the investors are all talking to us about that. And the ones we're talking to anyway, have absolutely received what we said to start with and started to talk about how we can take things to a whole different level. So it's a critical thing for us. And you know, I'd go as far as to say we will not partner with somebody who doesn't show to us absolute commitment to this. And we've gone at that right from the start, and all of the people we're talking to are bought into it, and not all of them yet are invested in women's sport already.
Thanks, James. The next question is from David Murray, who I think is...
I'm going to get camera one down my nose here.
You're used to it.
Before I ask a question, just thanks very much for everyone for turning up. This has been a really good event, and I'm not sure anyone else is doing this, so thank you everyone for making the effort. My question is around the business plan for the 100, and congrats on getting all the various bits in. It sounds like it's been terrifically successful so far. If you look at the income in the business plan, some might say it's aggressive. If you look at the domestic rights, they go up from 37, I think, to 54 next year, while overall ECB rights figures are flat. You will understand, I suspect, the way the rights market is at the moment, it's unlikely to go up in 28 or 29. If anything, it would go down. And yet the business plan's forecasting it to go up from 54 to 80. Now that may be the case or it may not be, but if the overall income is staying level at 220, can you give some guarantees that the ECB won't be just allocating that number as per the business plan and will be allocating an actual market rate for the 100? Because otherwise all you're doing is you're taking money away from income away from the non-100 parts of the ECB, which obviously includes the counties, in particular the non-host counties. So can you give some assurances that won't be the case?
It's a fascinating way that we run the business of cricket, which I think makes it better than other sports. If you look at football or rugby, everything is chunked down into the value that particular part of the sport is driving or not at the moment. I don't expect to see broadcast revenues go down in cricket in the long term. And when I see the amount of added investment that we're putting, say, into the women's game, from next year, there's £35 million a year that we're investing into the women's game. When I see what I think excitement that the investors are going to be bringing in to the 100, and when I see the state of Test match cricket, I'm very positive about the future and the business future. We have always allocated money based on where we think the investment case best lies. Take the women's game as an example. We are investing ahead of revenues for the women's game. That means that the amount of revenue that we're getting in for the women's game needs to grow, but we're putting the money in ahead of time. That means that money is coming from somewhere else within the game. And actually the short answer is that that's probably coming from men's Test cricket, because men's Test cricket for us is the most valuable asset. But that's the special thing about our game, in that all the money comes into one pot, and then we as a game, along with our stakeholders, and you are a stakeholder, a member of the ECB, decide where it's best to put the money. So if I come back to Tim's point, the money's really important, but it's not as important as the purpose. And ultimately that's what people are ending up investing in. And if we just chase money and we lose purpose, the money goes down the drain with it. So I'm hoping I can provide you some assurance just by explaining where the wider context is for us.
Just to follow up, one thing.
Sorry, Daniel,
Oh, well, they've got the management fighting.
No, David, I obviously know you well, and we've both got a similar background in sports. For me, I was on a small group that looked at the media rights last time around, and I don't buy your hypothesis that the media rights won't go up. There was one bidder in the market at that time because Warner Bros. Discovery, Eurosport, BT, however you want to label them, were in the middle of a massive merger. There was one credible competitor. I think there's going to be more competitive tension next time around. I think that window in the summer when the football is not happening is incredibly valuable to the sports broadcasters. So I would question your hypothesis about that. You've got a conservative BBC view of the world, but I'm sorry, I'm just winding you up. I don't believe that, because having sat there last time with one credible bidder, keeping your fingers crossed that they would hit the numbers you wanted, I actually think there's going to be a lot more competitive tension in the market next time around.
The question is whether you'll guarantee, if it goes up...
That's not mine to guarantee.
Look, ultimately, the value will always land where it's created. But within cricket, we have a time lag that allows us to develop. Whether that's investing in the 100, as we have done, whether it's in women's cricket, whether it's within the championship. The championship is not a money-making exercise for the ECB, but it underpins Test cricket, and therefore we can see the value in the long term. So I didn't realise you're BBC. Well, you give all your money to Match of the Day and to football anyway, so we'd love more money from the BBC.
He wants to help you inflate your rights.
Just a very quick follow-up, David. So Richard can't give a guarantee. However, what I can tell you is from my experience over the past 12 years, Richard comes from a county background. So he was at, 12 years?
10 and Somerset 6.
All right, so 16 years as a county chief exec. So he didn't come from outside of the game. He wasn't in marketing another sport. Richard has county cricket in his blood. I think what I can tell you has happened as an observer is that, and this is sometimes people can talk a good game, and I'd much rather Richard caveat and say I can't guarantee it, but actually what he has demonstrated already is that the broadcast revenue comes into the game at the moment at the top, and the ECB spends that on recreational cricket or wherever the game needs it. Like at the moment, women's sport needs an accelerator fund, if you like. Historically, the 18 counties got a distribution from broadcast revenue from the ECB, which was just over 2 million a year, and it was that for 6 or 7, 8 years in a row. 100 came along, and an extra 1.3 million got paid to all counties. So what the ECB could have easily done is said, when they did the calculations and then agreed to put a percentage of broadcast revenue into the teams from 2025 with new investors coming, they could have easily said, the 1.3 that currently goes to all the counties, because that effectively comes out of the 100 broadcast money, now we're going to take that off the counties. They didn't do that. They've effectively moved the extra 1.3 into the county partnership agreement. So the actual deeds, what they've done in practice, is that they've basically protected the current 18 county distribution separate to what's happening with the 100 broadcast.
Thank you. We're British, so we find it terribly uncomfortable to talk about money, don't we? But I think it's really helpful to try and get into it. And actually, I just wanted to follow up with Tim, because obviously Deloitte have been involved in both the kind of placing values and the forecasting. And it's not just the broadcast rights that's based on those forecasts, sponsorship, marketing, merchandise, all of those things. And I just wondered if you could just explain sort of how you've come to those modelling.
Yeah, so I think when you are putting together a document as comprehensive as we have, and it's unfortunate in many ways that it's out for full public consumption, but fundamentally we have to show an ambition that is to grow the competition in a way that maybe hasn't been possible to date, that demonstrates that the world post-partnership will open up opportunities that don't currently exist today. And then when you look at some of the fundamentals, so where we all expect the value of women's sport fundamentally to go in the future, this is the elite opportunity for women's sport in this country, number one. And the chance to develop and grow the commercial return from the women's game underpins many of the kind of forecasts that are within the documents. There's also the fact that we've got some pretty bold ambitions. Well, Vic and the team have got some pretty bold ambitions around the playing talent and where that can take us. And to Andy's point as well, I think we're expecting the broadcast market to look very different really as we come into, in particular, into 2028, 2029. And if you look at the trends in other countries, the emergence of Apple, of Amazon, of Netflix even, you just look at the boxing, well, call it boxing, over the weekend. The viewing figures are phenomenal for an entity like Netflix, who is testing the water in terms of
they're showing NFL on Christmas Day, aren't they? Yes.
So what we're seeing is we are seeing an emergence of the streaming platforms looking at sport. What you have in the 100 is digestible, short-form content that appeals to a mass market, and that will be, I believe, very appealing.
Thanks, Tim. That's really helpful. The next question is from Alan Hyam, who I'm looking around the room. There we go. Thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, and I'd just like to echo David's comments to thank everybody for coming here, and also put on record that from a broader county perspective, I don't think any county is doing more than Lancashire is to communicate with its members, so I think that ought to be recognised, and it certainly is by me. But I wouldn't mind just probing a bit further on David's question, because I don't think Richard really got to the heart of David's question, which is ultimately, there's a global TV deal that the ECB signs and negotiates, and then it's a decision how much we're going to pay towards the owners of the 100, which, when it was all of us, it didn't really matter when it was an internal allocation, but going forward, half of it broadly is going to be owned by somebody else, and half of it's going to be owned by the game. Now, if we're going to guarantee, we've seen these projections to an investor, if the investor says, well, that's the single biggest revenue figure in the business plan, that's going to really underpin all our profits, what promises are you giving to any investor about that 80 million, that 50 million? Are any of those figures at all underwritten, and to what extent? Or is the investor taking 100% of the risk of what the next TV deal would be?
I don't want to go into too much detail because there's confidentiality there with all of our main broadcasters. But ultimately, the responsibility is going to be with the investors, as is the responsibility is with us to make sure that Test match cricket retains its value. So long term, there is no issue about those guarantees. But what I would like to point out is that the valuations that are being accrued are nothing to do with the broadcast numbers, or the ticket sale numbers, or the sponsorships. You know, there was a lot made of that when some of that was put out in the public domain. But the value that we're seeing is basically about wanting to be part of an English summer, part of an English summer. It's about wanting to be able to partnership with some great clubs and some great brands. Why did we end up landing on the 51%, 49%? Because the venues are the one thing that is not replicable in English cricket. So if you go to Australia, all of the cricket venues are owned by the local governments. If you go to India, there are 30 international grounds, so you can take your pick. There's no scarcity there. In England, all of the grounds are owned by the clubs, and we need to have the clubs on side. We want them on side. We want them behind us. And that's what people are buying into. So the projections are important, and Tim, you've done a lot of work on them, so I don't want to say that they're not important, because they are. But if you look at the valuations, you can see that they are being supercharged. They're being supercharged by scarcity value, people wanting to be part of this competition and this cricketing environment.
I think Andy wanted to jump in and ask something.
I just want to make a point about this value appreciation point, because the thing that will change and has to change is the quality of the product on the pitch in the 100. It's not good enough where it is today, and I think the investors know they've got to improve the product. What do I mean by that? They've got to bring the best men and women from around the world to be playing cricket in the 100, and then there will be a value appreciation. The one bit of the business plan I feel is woefully under anticipated is the sponsorship revenues you can get if you get this right. So it's my life is selling sponsorship. I think we're so conservative in cricket. I think if we get the product right on the pitch, the global sponsorship revenues around the 100 can be significant, and I think the broadcast uplift will come. Whether that's sold as one package or different packages, that remains to be seen, but I think there is incredible additive value to be created through improving the on-pitch product.
Right, I'm on strict instructions on timing here, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which I think is from David Stanley.
Thank you very much, Lizzie. Mine is quite a simple one, actually, after the last two. What safeguards are in place to prevent the minority shareholder from gaining the majority shareholding in a franchise? In other words, say Lancashire sold 10% of its share to raise revenue, from deciding to move the team to another larger venue, e.g. from Old Trafford Cricket Ground to Old Trafford Football Club or the Etihad, or even another county ground.
Thank you. So, really good question, and I'll channel my inner James earlier. I don't want to bore you with arcane mergers and acquisitions, transaction kind of complexities, but there is a thing called reserve matters where you can have a shareholders agreement as a minority shareholder. So say we end up in a scenario where we're a minority shareholder, say that happens, but for the reasons that we've outlined earlier, the economic value was compelling. There would be, I can tell you now, 100% one of our reserve matters, and what that means as a reserve matter is that it cannot happen, whatever our percentage shares are if we're a minority, it cannot happen without our consent, express consent. And one of those reserve matters is that, one of them is that Manchester has to be in the name, and two is that it has to play at Emirates Old Trafford. So I don't know why they want to move up the road, but ultimately that would be Lancashire Cricket Club's decision, whatever our equity shareholding was.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question. We're going to move on to some questions from the members' representative group. A couple from Curtie. Thank you. Do you want to do them one at a time so that they can be answered one at a time? The first one.
Okay, this is actually on behalf of another member who couldn't be here tonight, David Gray. His biggest fear is the reduction of county championship cricket So can you confirm that Lancashire will continue to play cricket throughout the 100? And the second part of that is, how do you hope to get the new 100 fans to progress to watching T20, 50 over and county championship at Lancashire Cricket, when it appears that all three of these competitions have been pushed to the margins?
There's a lot of microphone bouncing going on here. Richard, are you going to do this one?
Best place to answer that, because those conversations are to be had. The Articles of Association of the ECB mean that the domestic schedule is determined by the members of the club, and you require a 2/3 majority to change what we've got now. So what we've got now, we stick with until we can get to a 2/3 majority to find something else to move to. Our view is, what I see at the moment, is so at one point I think there was a thought that there was a second tier of the 100. That noise is, I haven't heard that for months now. What I'm hearing more now is that county cricket should be played throughout the period, throughout the summer. And so Lancashire would always have a team in addition to the Manchester Originals. It's up to the members, but that's what I'm hearing at the moment.
No, I think that's right. So I think there's a couple of things there, Curtis. So it's Lancashire's responsibility. You know, if the 100 is the acquisition product to get more fans into cricket, it's my responsibility with the team is to convert people who've come to see a Manchester Originals game to come and watch Lancashire in a Blast game, or potentially even the County Championship. And that's our responsibility, our wider responsibility, and it's something we want to continue to do as we grow the ecosystem. I think also I can tell you now is that I understand how important this is, right? So Lancashire will always have a team playing county cricket of some sort during 100. Whether that's an ECB organised competition, I can't guarantee, but if there wasn't an ECB organised competition, we would be playing friendlies, either against other counties or against other teams from around the world. So, that's something that's really important to us. To me, Manchester Originals has its place within the ecosystem as an acquisition product and a growth product. But county cricket is loved and it's cherished, and we have a job to protect Lancashire. So at the end of the day, Manchester Originals is to support Lancashire cricket, and Lancashire cricket will stay very much as a key part of the calendar.
Thanks, Daniel. I think you've got another question, have you?
Yeah, so this is again on behalf of a lot of members who ask us this question, and I think it's quite important. Why isn't the club giving members, all of us in the room here and the wider membership, a vote on this issue?
That's James, Andy, one of you? All dodging the microphone.
I always get this one. So, I mean, we've been asked that a lot. Lots of the times we've consulted people ask us about that. I think, your starting point probably is, what do the club rules say? And the club rules say that strategic decisions are vested in the board. The members elect the board. Andy and myself were elected at the last AGM. Others have been elected at other times to discharge these responsibilities. This is a strategic decision. It's a very complicated and important strategic decision, and we're all approaching it in that way. I think when you think about the role that we've got as directors of Lancashire Cricket, I think that's got a relevance to your question. So myself, Andy, John and Chris are in the audience, and the other directors. We've got some really strong legal responsibilities that are personal responsibilities to us. So we're volunteers acting on, having been elected to do a role. We have legal responsibilities to do the best thing for Lancashire cricket. So we have to discharge those responsibilities. I think, we could find ourselves in an impossible position if the right strategic thing to do is to do something, but we've got members have voted for something different. That would be a really difficult situation for people to be in. And don't forget, members, if you have a vote, there's no legal responsibility around a vote. You can just freely vote however you want to do. And that's doesn't feel right in this kind of context. So I think with something like this, strategic business decision, that's why the club has a board. That's why we don't think it's the right thing to do to say let's have a full members vote on this, whatever your resolution would be. I don't know what your resolution would be, by the way, because we're being given a hugely valuable asset that we can do what we want with. So that seems like quite an attractive proposition to most of us, I think. The other thing I would say, to pick up something Alan said, is while we have said we don't think this is something that we should put to a wide membership vote, we've committed to communicate and be open, transparent, engaging, answer whatever questions anybody wants to ask. I think this is our 9th event. I saw in a message earlier today that we've done for members, and we've committed that when we've got a bit more detail around what a deal could look like, we'll take people through that in detail as well, and take you through some of the financials on that. So we're doing, I think, a lot to make sure that you, the people who care passionately that we are doing the right thing, can see that we are, and we'll keep working hard to do that.
Can I just something from my point of view that these guys perhaps can't say. The vote, or the word vote, is often taken, it's, for me anyway, it's not the vote itself that counts. There are two things that matter, and one is that first and foremost, what you as Lancashire have here, and what we can say that perhaps they can't, is you've got an amazing team here. You know, you think of what Daniel's done in terms of running venues throughout his career, Andy in terms of the commercials of sports. You've got an M&A lawyer, that's what his day job is, sat at the end. So you've got a fantastic team that you've vested to make that decision. And the second thing that's important is actually that they've done, did you say 9 so far? You know, and others have mentioned it in terms of the amount of communication, the amount of listening, and you won't be aware, but the amount of conversations that we have that where they will say, well, the members want this, how can we work to that? How can we go this way? This is what we've heard from members. So the quality of the leadership team here that are doing it, plus the listening, I think that's what counts in this. And then I've been at these where it has been a formal vote, and you'll have read about it all in the press and in terms of where that ends up. But I think what is important here is actually happening here for Lancashire.
I mean, if you think about the decisions we've really got to make, the 49% thing is happening. We've got to find a partner who we believe is strategically aligned with Lancashire. That's what we're working on, right? And some of the ones we are meeting, I've said it before, are our IPL teams, but we're trying to find ones where we feel we can have a long-term, sustainable, lifelong relationship. That's what we're looking at. So that's the first decision, is who is that partner. They've got to meet certain economic thresholds in terms of making a bid that's valuable, but we are working on that. Then the second big decision will be, do we want to sell more than 49% and go to a higher, sell some of that? And that will be the biggest decision we would have to make. And we would only do that if we felt that the money that would come in would pay down the debt of Lancashire to a level where the interest payments can be sustained for the next 30 years. And we can do something very specific about investment in the Cricket Centre, Cricket Academy, and anything else around the stadium or in Farrington that needs a bit more investment as it's getting. That's what we would use additional funds for. That's why we'd be taking that decision to say, is this a big enough chunk of money to really move the dial on that and make this cricket club sustainable, certainly in my lifetime and your lifetimes as well. That's the decision. Those are kind of the two decisions we've got to make. They're not rocket science, but there's a level of financial an element to it. Is the bid big enough to do that? Is it really big enough? Do we think in selling the future value of Manchester Originals we are getting enough to make Lancashire as strong and sustainable for the future? Those are the decisions we've got to make, and we'll make them and we'll have discussions. John Abrahams has, I hope you don't mind me saying, has just sent me a list of questions exploring all those things, and we've all got to discuss it and agree as a board, and your views need to be taken into account as members. I'm very clear on that, and that's why we're doing this, and you've got to let us know your views on that. That's it.
As a sports journalist, I think I'll just add something in here, but I've been hugely impressed with how transparent this process has been compared to when we've had particularly in other sports, I'm going to name football, just how much it's done under cloak and dagger, and then all of a sudden you get a name and a figure. And the fans and the supporters of the club have had no idea what's gone on, how it's happened, and I think this process has been so much more transparent, so much clearer, and so much better communicated than it has been in other sports. I don't know if you agree, Tim.
I completely want to echo that. I've been absolutely amazed by the desire to share information with members, to share information publicly at times. This doesn't happen in other sports, and I think that is an important factor to consider. We do also at times though have to then consider we are trying to get the best outcome, and some things need to make sure that they stay kind of as part of a process and are carefully managed. But that's, you know, that is all credit to everybody who's sat here today.
Thank you so much. And I think we have a question from Simon Reynolds.
Hello. Hi everyone. Thank you. We've really enjoyed this evening. It's been very insightful listening to your answers. Something else that kept cropping up from members was about the timeline, and I think Lizzie and Vic touched on it at the start. But if you can just confirm what are the timings for this process and what are the next steps, and when do you think these deals will be finalised, or given the close proximity, as you mentioned, to next summer, how will it impact the 2025 competition?
Sure. So working forward from here, the next round and submissions from investors who are interested in the Manchester Originals, we hope there's lots, will be mid-December. So what that means is they'll put forward a whole host of information. Again, we're trying to find, so there'll be a number, but also a whole list of things that these guys will be in conversation with them about in terms of cricket operations and governance and branding and all these sorts of things. We will then work with this team and, from my perspective, all kind of 8 teams through that kind of Christmas into the new year to understand, clarify, work through, and then come to a place, as Andy and others have talked about, to a position of 2, maybe 3, but we're aiming for kind of 2 that they feel that these are the right fit for Lancashire cricket. This we can work with these people for the long term, for strategic long-term growth. And that will be mid-January, by that time happens. At mid-January, we'll then do a final round to effectively convert that 2 into 1, into a preferred partner for Manchester Originals and Lancashire cricket. So let's just, 1st of February. Now, you then go into the, for those that know this space, you go into the long-form legal documents. The lawyers are assuring me it will be 90 days, no more, all very clean and easy. Yeah, so the room knows. The room knows. That's what they're saying at the moment. Let's say it takes a little bit longer. It might do, right? But either way, say it fixed that 90 days in an optimistic world. It's good to be optimistic. You're kind of completing, what's that, February, March, end of April sort of time where everything is signed and proverbial lady is singing. So that's the kind of timeline that we're looking to. But what that means is we're well into pre-season at that point. We're well into cricket in this country being on, forget the 100, but just in general, and things are happening in this country. So 2025 season will look and feel very, very, you know, for a fan of the sport and frankly for a player on the field as well, very, very similar in many ways to the 2024 in the sense of how it will all work. What we'll then use, we'll use the summer to transition across, and that, to an extent, is a 2-staged approach, because at the moment the 100, as has been discussed, was very ECB held. That will move across to Lancashire and also the investor, which will be different, or potentially different here than what it is in Yorkshire, and different again, Birmingham, based on all those discussions that will happen between now and then. So finishing kind of in April at some point, 25 season, it will look and feel quite similar, and then the big change will happen at, let's say, 1st of September next year.
Can I just follow up a bit on that? It might be James, it might be Vic. There are obviously some sort of slightly detailed logistical things about if you are going to change your kit or change your name or change your branding. I mean, you don't just get kit printed overnight, do you? These take time. But also, to what extent will the ECB, obviously you won't own the teams, but you still own the tournament. To what extent will you have control over making sure that you haven't got 8 teams playing in pink or whatever?
Yeah, look, what's really important for us from the transition point of view is running a competition, whether it's test matches or something like the 100, is quite complicated. There's a lot of things that happen in lots of different things, and we just got to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And someone has forgotten to put tickets on sale for the game on a Saturday night, whatever it may be. So, of all those things, that's why we're taking our time with it. There are things called operation narratives and service agreements and documents and more documents and even more documents, that just making sure that we have articulated every little bit, so someone like Daniel and James can be really clear about what the ECB is looking to do and not do, what is the responsibility of the venue, what is the responsibility of the team in whatever shape and form, and how that will work on a day-to-day basis. So on the whole, we want to be able to give, as a principle, as much creative freedom to the teams as is possible. To your second part of your question of everyone playing in pink. We want to allow Daniel at an executive level and a board, with whoever comes in alongside him, freedom to bring in those. It doesn't make sense for me to say what I said previously about the best partners from people that have got skills from India and America and all the rest of it, for them to come in and then for us at the centre to go, actually, you've still got to listen to me when I say that you've got to play in this and do that and do all that kind of stuff. We want to give them the freedom. However, there are important checks and balances on a certain number of things. Some of them are hugely important. As we've talked about, the window will always remain with the ECB, that will stay fixed. On things, and I know it was a slightly flippant example, but on things like the kit, effectively, as long as it's inoffensive, we have no real say, except for we don't want 8 people playing in exactly the same kit. So that, again, has
That works for Test cricket.
You've heard it here first. Maybe everybody will be playing in pink. Who knows?
In white.
There you go.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much.
For clarity,
Go on.
we're not talking to the people who wear pink.
Okay. There you go. Heard it here. Now, that's all of the questions from all of you, and I think that was a really good range of questions. Some pretty hard-hitting ones, of making them sweat up here on the panel. I'm not going to go on because I'm getting an evil look from the back row to say, get on with it, Lydia, and stop talking. But I think we should just wrap up with maybe Andy, in case you want to have some closing remarks, and Daniel about kind of what comes next from a Lancashire point of view in terms of communication and all of that, and what you're going to be doing. You're not all swanning off to the sunset over Christmas, are you? You're going to be busy?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say, I mean, there is different agreements that will be signed with any partner coming in to partner Lancashire on the ownership of the Manchester Originals. There'll be a classic sort of shareholders agreement, which is fine. That will be easy relatively, where we will spend all of our time, if we find a partner, is on what will be basically a joint venture agreement, where all those things that we want as Lancashire Cricket need to be in that agreement. And if you think there's things that we're worried about is the involvement of our cricket department in the coaching and the performance side of the Manchester Originals. You know, we think we've got the best medical staff in English cricket. We want things to happen that make sure our cricket departments are involved in whatever the future of the Manchester Originals is. That's just one example. We will be spending a lot of time on creating that joint venture agreement, and that is one area where the input of members, you know, it should be readily sought and fed into that process to make sure we are protecting the future of Lancashire cricket, because that agreement is going to last forever. So we need to make sure that we get that right, and that's where we as a board will spend a lot of our time. You know, the money is actually relatively simple at the end of the day, that shareholders agreement, but the JV agreement is going to be where we spend a lot of time, and it's where the partner is going to have a lot of ideas and thoughts, and you know, some of them are big and powerful, and we need to make sure we've absolutely nailed our position down when we do that. And you can, you know, we will do that. Daniel can talk about the next communication tiers, but rest assured we are doing that with absolutely the best long-term intentions for the cricket club. That's what we're here to do, and to protect our position in what is exciting. I think it's very exciting, but it's a little bit scary as well. So we've got to get that right. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I think one thing I'd like to say is thank you everybody who's actually made the effort to come out on a Monday night. I really appreciate it. And for everybody who's come to all of the others. We need to I need to speak to Gaz, need to find a list. If there's anybody who's actually been involved in all 9, then they need to get something special from us, perhaps a night out with John Abrahams or something. We'll sort that out. But we'll do something. I think I wanted to thank everybody for coming. I do appreciate your patience and your engagement. We will continue to over-communicate on this subject, and I apologise to the people who are a bit bored by this now, but it's really important that we've made a commitment for transparency, and hopefully for people who've seen me at these events I've genuinely said you can ask me any question you like, and I think hopefully people would say that I have been straightforward and transparent when people have asked me questions, and we will all continue to do that. Because it's really important that, as James said, the board has a big responsibility here, and Andy said it as well, to make there's 2 decisions to make, and they're very big decisions, and the directors have personal liability. But it's important for us to articulate and explain when we get to a position where we've got a preferred partner and we've got the outline of a deal and what it looks like in terms of a partnership and operating on the ground, as Andy said, we've committed to running a separate session at that point where we'll put a couple of slides up and we'll take the members through. This is the decision that the board is made and is recommending that is in the absolute best interests of Lancashire Cricket Club. And we will continue to do that. What I would say is, please keep the difficult questions coming, direct them to Joe and colleagues at MRG, because trust me, they hold us to account pretty daily, some of the emails that I get. And I was going to say thank you for that, but I will. But that's what our democracy is like. The MRG were elected at the AGM. They hold us to account as an executive on a daily basis on your behalf. So please send your difficult questions in. We will continue to answer those difficult questions. And I hope you've enjoyed the webinar we did and now the question time format. If there is a different form of communication you'd like us to consider, please let MRG know, and hopefully we've shown you that we'll do whatever we can to keep it going. But I think just to thank Lizzie again. To finish off.
Antiques Roadshow next.
Yeah, Antiques Roadshow for me, yes. And hopefully a salary along the lines of Fiona Bruce. I was told to get this done by 8 o'clock, and it's 52 minutes past 7, so I'm counting that as a win. So my thank you to James, Tim, Andy, Richard, Vic and Daniel for what I think has been a really informative evening, and my thanks to you for coming along and asking great questions, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.